welcome back to Education. I am here with Mackenzie, and I'm so excited to have her on. I was recently on her podcast, Talking Smack, and it was so much fun. I am so stoked to have another conversation with her. So welcome, Mackenzie.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here. People loved your episode too. They were like, "Oh my gosh, she's amazing. I love this." So we got really good feedback. So I'm excited to be on your podcast and hope that I can share some value too.
Yeah, absolutely. For obviously the listeners who don't know, I met Mackenzie online on social media, and I actually worked with you with your online course, like course creating and coaching. So even though I'm not a lash artist, I felt like when I was searching for coaches at the time, I really just wanted to find somebody that I vibed with. And like, I'm also a firm believer that education doesn't need to be hyper specific. I feel like if you're like a forever learner, you can learn from anything and anyone. And I just liked your vibe. I liked what you were doing. And I was like, love this girl. And I cannot say enough good things about your courses and everything that I've learned from you. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you. That's a huge compliment to me, especially like when someone's coming in from like a still beauty industry, but something that's not as exactly specific as what I'm teaching. I'm always like, I want you to let me know like if this is still good info, because when it comes to course creation, I feel like too there's so many inner workings that you don't think about, like the systems that you need to put together that can translate to any industry. So I loved that you were able to, and I love that you talk about being a forever learner, because I think that's so important when you're a business owner, because when you get to that point thinking I know everything, which I kind of was like the first year or two in, I was
my God, yes.
I'm good, I could figure it out on my own. And the moment I started to take more education classes, more technique classes, more business classes, I was like, shit, I do not know everything. This is actually really helping me and making a big difference in my business.
Yeah. I remember getting out of beauty school and being like, easy, this is gonna be cake. Like, I was just like, I know everything that there is to know. And then I think the biggest thing that there's a separation in the beauty world, like as far as like school goes, where they really just teach you how to pass the test. We talk about that all the time, that you have to build your skill outside of it. But I think one thing that we kind of skip over is that there's like beauty school, or even a lot of the courses you see, don't teach you business. So like, even if you have like all of the skill in the world and you really do know your stuff, you still don't know everything. And so I feel like we all come out a little pompous out of beauty school. We're like, I have this dialed in, or even after a few like continuing education courses. But I think that the real secret sauce is knowing that you don't know anything fully and that you can just always keep learning.
I totally agree. I know, it's like you graduate beauty school and then you take your test and you're like, I have this piece of paper that says I'm qualified to do all of these things and I know everything in the entire world and I'm set.
It's so true. It's like the test gives you that boost of confidence because it's hard. And so I think once you get through it, you're like, oh yeah, no, I'm good. Like, this is all I'm ever going to run into.
I know, especially because it's like there isn't, with like real estate, you have to do continuing hours. Like every year, every couple of years, you have to do continuing hours to make sure you're up on the trends. But in beauty school, it's so different because you get your license and then all you have to do is pay every 2 years to renew it. And you're like, I'm solid. Yeah. Or even like tattoo and permanent makeup and stuff, like depending on what state you're in, like here, you take your bloodborne pathogens, you pay for your license, you're good. And it's scary.
So crazy. I couldn't agree more. It's funny, like the longer I've been in the industry, the scarier it's gotten, where I'm just like, I can just do whatever I want with this license. Like, that's scary. Like, now that you're kind of more aware of the issues and things that arise, you're like, hold on, I need more. I'm not ready. Too much responsibility.
Literally. Or you think about like the industry in the UK, specifically like in the lash world, like you can be certified in one day with a $30 course and you're good to go. And it's
so crazy.
It's insane to me, like the differences, and there's no regulation over there. And like obviously certain states are different. I know Alabama, you don't have to have any sort of license. You could literally just watch YouTube and do lashes. So
that's so crazy. I didn't realize that. I know. I feel like I always am a little behind on these changes because coming from California, we're like the most strict, most crazy state. So I always think kind of at this like high level of like, we're not allowed to do so many things, and like they're so particular about like, I mean, even down to like tinting, how like they control like what tint line we can use, kind of a thing. So it's like I forget that there's other places even in the US that are so laissez-faire about everything, and that's just so scary for me, like not even thinking like necessarily the beauty professionals, because there could be I know there's kick-ass beauty providers there that are doing all of the things that they need to be doing, but there's also the flip side of just like the people not doing it who don't know any better, and then the poor clients having to deal with that. It's just so crazy. I'm definitely against like less regulation. I think that
Mm-hmm.
regulatory boards are super important.
Well, I feel like that's what gives the industry a bad rap sometimes. Or someone will try lash extensions once, or let's say a brow wax and get their skin lifted or something, and they refuse to even try it again. It's like, I think we may have talked about this on our podcast, and I'm bringing it up again, but it's like when you get your hair done, you just find a new artist because you still want to get your hair done. But there are certain things with like, if you get lash extensions or your brows done, or a facial that you don't like, I feel like even with facials too, you probably just would find a new person. But like, I feel like especially with lashes and brows, because it's like that's how you're presenting yourself, that's framing your face. Like, you can really turn potential clients off if they're going to someone who doesn't know what they're doing and they aren't doing it properly, and they just think everyone is the same and doesn't do it that way.
Yeah, no, and it's true. And I think the other thing that we kind of boast about a lot is that our services, like different than hair or skin, is that we get the instant gratification. But I think that that's a double-edged sword. I think that it can also be a really big negative, because say you don't have the instant result that you need in a facial, you're like, okay, well, I'll try it again, see what happens. I know that overnight it's not going to be a miracle fix, but like if you do a bad job on brows, they're gone. Like they're done. Like they've checked out. They're not going to give you another chance all the time if you messed up or whatever. So it's like the stakes are kind of high. It's a little bit scary for both ends, like the client trusting us and then us like trying to do our best for the client, and making sure you're on the same page with them, making sure you know exactly what they're looking for. And at first I feel like, from me being, I kind of love the perspective that we're both kind of on the outside of what each other does, because like from my perspective for the longest time with lash extensions was that you just like, because at the beginning there wasn't a ton of options as far as what lashes you were applying, so it really was like glue and stick. And it wasn't kind of, now it's gotten so creative, and like finding the eye shapes and like all of these different things that you're doing, it's grown into, I think both our services and our industries have moved on from a cookie cutter kind of a vibe, and very, very much so more curated.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I couldn't agree more. Like the customization now that you have versus when I took my first class 10 years ago, it literally was, I was taught, all right, you pick it up, you dip it in glue, and then you place it. And I'm like, sweet, solid. And I think that's part of where that false confidence comes in, because it's just like, well, that's all you do? Like, that's easy. And it was like, you did the same look on everyone. They were like, just use 11, 13, and 15 open eye on everyone. So I was like, okay, I am an expert. I know what I'm doing.
That way, though.
And then I started.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, and then I started finding other people on Instagram that actually did customize sets, and I was like, maybe I don't know what I'm doing. Like, those are beautiful, and I have no idea how to do that.
Yes. No, it's true. And I think that there's, at least in my perspective, when I was younger, I would take those, or newer in the industry, I would take the course and like take whatever the instructor said as Bible, and then be like, no, I know I do everything like they told me, I'm doing perfect. And then like you grow a little bit, you're like, okay, I'm allowed to question things. I'm allowed to use my own like strategic thinking, like, and figure these things out and actually ask more questions and see like what my personal or professional opinion is on the whatever the case is. But it's so funny because I do remember just being like, no, I'm good. I got the certificate. I did what they said, and now I'm done.
Mm-hmm. I will follow this to a T, and I will not stray, and I will be perfect.
Exactly. I love it. You are a lash tech. Are you a esthetician or cosmetologist?
Esthetician.
Okay, cool. And then you own your own salon?
Mm-hmm, I do.
Okay, cool.
Yes. So I opened my.
Yeah, go ahead.
Oh. So I opened my business 8 years ago, and then 2021 I opened a storefront, and I have 3 employees now, and I got to a place in the very beginning where I had 11 employees, and that was insane. So it's been nice now having like my core group of 3. And it's been wild having employees, and I definitely don't think it's for everyone, and I don't know if it will be for me much longer. And I
Okay.
think that's something, not a lot. I totally took this conversation in a different direction, but I think
No,
about,
that was gonna be my question.
it's not necessarily something people think about, is like, am I willing to step up into that leader role? I have to change myself to be a good leader for these people
Yeah.
and make sure that I'm leading us in a direction that everyone's happy, everyone's making money. And it is a lot of work. And if you have a full clientele, I'm telling you right now, you do not have the time to bring on a bunch of employees.
No, I couldn't even imagine with what I have on my plate as it is, like with the podcast, educating, and then the clientele. I couldn't imagine having like I know that they're like getting employees so you have more free time, but I'm like that's a whole other job. Like that's you're managing. Like that's a whole other hat that you're essentially putting on. Like that's a lot of work. I could not imagine 11 though.
I know. So I had like 4 full-time employees, and all the rest were part-time, working
Okay.
like 2 days a week or something. And that was also really challenging because they wanted to grow their clientele and they wanted to open more hours, but they only had such a small time
Yeah.
available. And so that was really tough for me to be able to like have to sit down with them and say, hey, like, if you want to grow here, you need more availability here. I know that like you're working 2 jobs right now, your other job is full time, but if this is something that you want to do, like we need to sit down and create goals for you. And so
Yeah.
that part I like. I love sitting down doing one-on-ones and being like, what are your goals? How can I help you get there? But it's also really hard when, luckily, the team I have now, they're like go-getters. They want to post on Instagram. They want to do their own outreach. But there are some people who are like, I'm here to clock in and clock out. I want
Yes.
you to bring me all the clients. I want you to do, you know, all the things for me, which is great because they're probably going to be an employee for a long time and
Yeah.
they're not going to leave you. But then you have your go-getters who are amazing and they do all the things that you want them to do on their own. Yes, they need your guidance, but they don't need you to hold their hand all day, every day. But chances are they're going to leave you in a year or a year and a half
I was
because they do want to do their own thing, which
that's so
again,
tricky.
it's hard being a salon owner because like you just have to know not everyone's gonna stay. Like you could
Yeah.
create an amazing environment. One of my a couple of my girls, they've only left because they went on maternity leave and they're like, I want to be home with baby, which is great because that, shows me, okay, I did a really good job of creating an environment where they could thrive. And now they want to do life. They want to do,
Yeah.
their thing. And, one day they might come back. One of my girls has been with me for this August will be 4 years.
Oh,
And she's
wow.
one of the ones who's like, I love being here. I'll do social media here and there, but I want to clock in and clock out. I don't want to deal with that headache. And I was like, girl, I don't want to deal with this headache either, but
Right.
here I am.
None of us do.
Yeah, we're doing it.
Right?
Because what's the alternative? Clocking into a
True.
9 to 5, I was gonna say sitting all day. I am sitting all day pretty much. But like I have the freedom and flexibility to say, in September I'm gonna take 2 weeks off. And
Yeah.
in this, I see people talk about, getting denied for vacation time, denied for time off, or like something gets messed up and they get sick and their company doesn't take care of them. And I feel like for me, my values and my goals have always been I want to take care of the person first.
Yeah.
Like, and so many salons, the first salon I worked at, they look at you like you're a paycheck for them.
Yeah.
And they're going to work you until they're done with you or
Yeah.
until you get so fed up with it that you're done. And
Yeah.
so it's just, you got to think about all of those things. And one thing I would have done differently is I would have brought one person, because I brought 2 employees on at the same time. I would have brought
That's really tricky.
one person on to be an apprentice and really train them and then pass half of my clientele to them. Myself,
Okay.
I would do a price raise, and clients who could continue to see me would continue to see me and they would stay at that rate. And that's when half of my schedule would become freed up. So I would
Yes.
be able to then pour into another employee and take it step by step and do it one by one rather than be like, oh
Yeah.
yeah, everyone, come on, join the party. Like, let's go. And then I have
We'll figure it out.
yeah. And then I have the girls need my help because they're doing models, but I also still have a full clientele that I'm taking care of. And then I'm trying to like step away from my client to make sure they're good because I want to make sure they feel confident that their work is up to my standards and theirs.
That's
And
the
the clients
trickiest thing. That's the scariest I think for any of us bringing in, because I mean, we build kind of a family and a friendship with these clients, right? And then to be like, this is so and so, and they're gonna start taking care of you, even though I've seen you for the last X amount of years, it's really scary. But then you had it's scary from both sides, because you're like, I am in charge of this other person, this new person's livelihood, like I'm welcoming them in, but like they also have to care enough to take care of my clientele. But then also, if they care too much, like you said, they might leave because they're obviously self-started, self-motivated. But then if they don't care at all, like, are they going to do well, perform well, or are they really just here just to clock in and clock out? It's such a fine, honestly, all of these things, all of these factors. That's why I always love talking to people who do have employees, because these are all the things that terrify me about having employees. Because it's anyone's game. It's such a gamble going into employment type situations. And then, like you said, I love the idea of you starting slower and kind of like removing things from your plate, but then also allowing yourself to kind of mentor and help with the new employee, because I think that's the only way that it really could work. I mean, obviously you figured it out through trial and error, but I think going into it, that sounds like the most realistic kind of transition.
Totally. And it's like at the end of the day, it's your name on the door, and you need to be bringing people in that you know are going to protect that name and that reputation. And you have to be so intentional about who you let in, because this is someone you're going to be mentoring. This is someone that you're going to be spending a lot of time with, and you want to make sure you like them as a person, because I'm a firm believer of, if you bring the right people in, you can train them up to your standards,
I
even if
agree.
they're fresh out of beauty school. Like, and so many salons will say like, oh well, we require experience, and it's like, okay, that's great, but their experience could still be shitty. Like, you would still have to completely retrain them.
Absolutely. Yeah. No, you're so right. And talk about double the work, right? Like, wouldn't you rather have somebody come in that's brand new, doesn't know anything, doesn't have any like set ways of doing things, than having to redo things or like, unlearn things? That sounds like a lot more work. So we kind of dabbled into that. Now that we talked about your kind of salon ownership and all of that, what got you into educating and wanting to educate? Because it sounds like your plate was pretty full as it was.
So I started educating in 2017, and it honestly started because someone messaged me and said, "Hey, like, I really love your work. Would you train me?" And that was kind of like on my horizon. I had thought about doing it. I just didn't really know how to execute. I totally got hung up in my own head of, I have to create this huge giant manual first. I have to create a website dedicated to this like sales page, and I need to create all these systems and this like welcome email and this sequence of emails and all this stuff. And then I was like, sure, I'll do it. Because I was like, I'm never going to sit down and actually do this and execute it and market it. Like, let me get my feet wet. And so with her, I just said, hey, I've never done this before. I've taken a number of trainings. I will teach you every single thing that I know. You're going to be my guinea pig. I'll give you a discounted rate for it. And then if you need continuing help or education or anything, like, I'm happy to offer you a 1-day, like, free model day that I can make sure that I'm doing the best that I can. And she was like, yes, of course, like, no worries. Like, I'm down, I'm in. And I think I charged her $600 for, I only did a 1-day class, because back then there weren't really 2-day classes even yet. And it went really well. And it was so funny too, because when I was talking about all the things that I knew, I'd be like, and this. And so I was like, she had a manual and I had my manual, and I was writing notes. I was like, I'm going to update this in the next couple of days, and then I'll send this back to you. So for anyone too who's like wanting to educate or wanting to create online courses, you don't have to have a full final draft done first, because that's going to really stunt you from actually putting your offers out. Think about like, what's your first viable product? What are you going to say? Okay, I'm okay with this right now. I know the moment I get into training or I start doing that, there are other things I'm going to add. You can always revise things. And that's something that my students have loved, because even if it's a year later, I'll be like, hey, I updated my slides. I wanted to make sure you had access to this. And that's what's really helpful about online courses, because you can just go in and update, send an email out, and people can be like, oh, hell yeah, I got new info here.
Yeah, totally.
And so, that really sparked my love of training, because I struggled really bad in the beginning. Like, even though I thought I had it figured out, like, my retention was horrible. I was struggling. I was so just down because my clients were texting me all the time, like, hey, my lashes aren't lasting, or hey, I'm not happy with how the set turned out. And I was constantly having to fix my work, which I think was really good trial and error for me, and also really helped me check my ego and realize, like, I can't take this personally. I have to look at this as constructive criticism of this is only going to help me get better. So when I do get to that point of, if a client was unhappy now, I'm like, girl, lay back down. Like, no big
Oh yeah.
deal. Let me fix it. I'm like, I want to make sure you're happy. Whereas before I'd be like, they don't respect my work and they don't do this and that and the other. And I really had to think about how I was thinking about that stuff. And so with teaching, it just really helped me. It got me excited because I was able to help all of my students avoid all of the mistakes I made in the beginning. And that was something that I, like to think was different about my trainings is I also talked a little bit about business. I talked about how to price their services. I talked about, a little bit of social media strategy. Of course, it was really technique heavy and hands-on heavy, but I was also like, I want to give you all these other tools I wish I had in these other trainings. And that's where it's been really cool too, to have the online courses available that if someone comes in and they are like really struggling with the technique and hands-on, they have access to all those online courses that they can go learn and go into that and still get that support as well on the
Yeah.
business side.
That was one of my favorite things when I started working with you and downloading, because I did the create your own course, like your online program for that, and I loved, like, all of a sudden I logged in and I think I messaged you and I was like, I have like everything, and you were like, yeah, no, that's included, and I was like, no, there's like extra courses in here, like, I didn't pay for these, and you're like, no, that's included. But I was so excited because there was so many different things that, like, one of the things that I remember using that I never thought I would was when I started doing lash lifts, and you have like a gel pad application video. And I was like, I went into this not thinking that I would ever utilize something like this, but like it still correlates. Like, I'm a brow artist who happens to do lash lifts, and like the lash education can come into play with that. So, and then I think you also have stuff like on kind of like on mindset and things like that. And I really like that too, because I think as much as we want to be like little worker bee machines, we have to think about all of the other things, social media, like we said, that we don't necessarily love participating in. We do have to, regardless. Business is not the most fun aspect of our job, but it is part of our job if we want to stay at the game. And like all of these elements really come into play. But I do 100% agree with you. When I first started teaching, you just don't know what you need to teach until you start teaching. And it sounds so backwards, because I thought the same thing. I was like, I have to be in the industry for X amount of years before I can start teaching. I need to know all of these things. I need to check all these things off before I feel confident enough to train other people. But then I got that DM and I was like, wait, no, I do want to teach you. If you're already asking, like, let's just dive in. And I'm so glad that I took that jump too, because I wouldn't be where I am if I was constantly trying to, make things work. And I have to have, like you said, these systems in place before actually making this leap. And you end up really having to go backwards about it. You really have to just dive in, because it's also really hard to put yourself, at least for me, when I was first starting to teach, was putting myself in the shoes of a newbie was really tricky. So trying to think of all of the things that I wish someone told me when I first started was hard for me, because I had learned all of the things and kind of gone past that. So going backwards was hard. It was really nice talking to the students, their potential students or whatever, or other professionals, and get their feedback and be like, oh, I can help you with that. I just didn't know you needed to know that. Like, it just makes you build out everything so much better. I totally agree.
I love that you bring that up, because there have been, even like within the last year, there have been questions that students have asked me that I'm like, I have never thought that should be in my curriculum. And I'm like, I'm changing everything. Like, that absolutely
Yes.
needs to be in there. And I think it's so cool and such a mindset shift for anyone who wants to do training, wants to do online courses. You have to like break it down to the basics that you know so well that you think it's stupid to teach. And
Yes.
and when you think about it that way, you're realizing you're teaching someone who's brand new, because so many people have that fear of, well, I don't want to start training because so many other people are doing it, or I don't want to start training because everyone else already has online courses. And when you're marketing to your previous self. You're not marketing to those same people who are on your same level or ahead of you. And
Yes.
I feel like when people struggle with that, they also have to remember, like, you went through all of that and you're going to deliver your information way differently than I am, way differently than Megs is. And someone might relate and learn from you better than us. And that's okay. And it's like, another encouraging, another piece of encouragement to just go for it.
Yeah. I think it's the same as I think that as many differences as there are to educating, but then also being a service provider, there's a lot of parallels too. And the same way that, like, can I do these brow services at the same level as my neighbor? Probably. We're probably close. But, like, there's going to be a reason the client chooses me over her or vice versa. And I think that's the thing that we all oftentimes forget when we're talking about oversaturation and, like, there's so much of this. You're right. There's as many variations and as much saturation as you're feeling, there's also the same type on the flip side of the clientele of the student trying to learn something. Like, they may not register, or maybe one is like too visual and they really want to read some stuff, so somebody comes out with an ebook or something, and like that's an easier way for them to take that information. Like, there's just so many different ways to do things. And then I think it also almost creates like this funnel of people educating in the same way. And I think that as much as that feels like there's too much, it's kind of a nice avenue for you to go a different direction. Like, if everyone's doing it this way, maybe create something that's different than what you're seeing a ton of. And then you're going to find all of the students or customers or clients or whatever who are looking for that thing that's so different than what they're seeing a ton of. Like, they want to learn that thing, but not in that way. And they're waiting for that person to come out with that thing. And I just feel like we oftentimes build ourselves up to look like our idols, and then we're like, now I look like everybody else. And it's like, okay, but your uniqueness is what really set you apart, and like that's what's gonna make you blow up.
And I totally agree. Like, we could all be talking about the same stuff, and different people are going to relate to different people. Like, even though you're talking about the same thing, if you're putting your spin on it, if you're putting your personality on it, if you're wording it in a different way, then it's going to be okay. And I think that's where a lot of the fear comes in too, of like, oh, they already did it, so I can't. Their audience is not your audience. Like, you might have a very small amount of overlap, but it's like, if you want to share your voice, do it. See what works, see what sticks. And like you said, that's what's going to make you stand out, is you being who you are. And if you're humorous, if you're funny, like, put that humor in there. Be funny about it. If you're more like dry humor, like, I don't know, you just got to be yourself. And if you're shy, like, it's okay to get on and be like, hey guys, I'm shy, but I really wanted to share this with you. Like, it's okay to show your personality, because you're more relatable than you realize. We're all not that different.
Yes. And I think there's the idea of the influencer realm, right? Where you have to be jet setting every weekend and like doing all of these things. And it's like, okay, but as funny as it is, that's not relatable. Like, that's not the norm for a lot of people. Like, being a couch potato every Saturday because it's the way that you unwind, that's going to be more relatable to a lot more people than you would think. Like, not everybody else is just taking trips and like, have X amount of dollars in the account. Like, I just feel like all the things that we strive for, and then it's like, if I have this, then I can influence, then I can be on here. And it's like, all of your normal mediocre, or what you're thinking is mediocre, is actually more like realistic and relatable. It's so funny. We definitely flip the script a little too much. It's like, no, actually that's not true.
Yeah, and it's like,
hey, it's Emily here from Brow Fox Beauty. I'm so proud to be sponsoring this episode of Brow Education. If you are new here, let me tell you a little bit about Brow Fox Beauty. We are a professional brow line for the esthetician. We specialize in easy retail for the busy esthetician. We also have a line of better back bar basics, so you can be super confident putting pre and post wax solution and massage oil onto your client's skin, giving them the best glow and the best brows yet. You can find more information at browfoxbeauty.com or on social media at browfoxbeauty.
There's the idea of the influencer realm, right? Where you have to be jet setting every weekend and like doing all of these things. And it's like, okay, but as funny as it is, that's not relatable. Like, that's not the norm for a lot of people. Like, being a couch potato every Saturday because it's the way that you unwind, that's going to be more relatable to a lot more people than you would think. Like, not everybody else is just taking trips and like, have X amount of dollars in the account. Like, I just feel like all the things that we strive for, and then it's like, if I have this, then I can influence, then I can be on here. And it's like, all of your normal mediocre, or what you're thinking is mediocre, is actually more like realistic and relatable. It's so funny. We definitely flip the script a little too much. It's like, no, actually that's not true.
Yeah, and it's like those, jet setting influencers and stuff, they can be inspirational. That can be something you can strive for if that's something that you want. Like, there's nothing wrong with that. But also, exactly like you said, like, literally all day on Sunday, I laid in bed. And I was like, I need to bed rot. Like, this is where I need to be right now. And like, I made a post a little while back, and I was talking about, I saw someone else post something like this, and it was just basically like, start where you are with what you have. Because so many of us have that mindset of, once I reach this goal, or once I have this thing, then I'll do it. Then I'll do it. No, newsflash, you're never going to do it. Like, you need to look at it from that standpoint of like, do you think Jaclyn Hill started in the $10 million house or whatever it is that she's in, and like all the crazy things? No, she was sitting in her laundry room floor creating YouTube videos. Like, I'm literally in my office right now. I won't show you guys because it's embarrassing, but there are boxes upon boxes of lash stuff in here. My Christmas decorations are sitting in this office right now because I haven't bagged them up to put them in the garage. Like, I might as well just leave them here because Christmas is 6 months from now. Like, at this point, like,
so true.
You know, and it's like, that's with social media too. You don't have to share all that stuff. You don't have to share every single thing. You don't have to share the messy sides if you don't want to. But the messy side is relatable. Like, people love seeing the behind the scenes. And yeah, just start where you are with what you have, and you're gonna get there. You're gonna be able to continue to do that. If it's a goal of yours, you've got to just go for it.
I agree. I always love the quote, done is better than perfect, because I feel like that is the most like, that's like the best business advice I've ever been given. It's like, you're right, just put it out there. And like, every time that I've used that as like, if I felt stuck and be like, okay, done is better than perfect, it's worked out fine. Like, or done way better than I was expecting. Like, you know what I mean? And I just feel like more often than not, that's the case. As much as we try to tell ourselves it's not.
That perfectionism will hold you back too. Like, especially like thinking about me when I first started, I thought my manual had to be perfect. I thought my sequence had to be, I thought my email sequence had to be perfect. No, it's about the value that you have to share. And I live by that quote, that done is better than perfect. And there's another quote that I want to follow that up with, is perfectionism is the thief of progress.
Yes.
And it's so, like, you have to really think about it. Like, if you have goals and you are the only one holding yourself back because you're like, it's not perfect, like we were talking about before, you can always revise things later. You can always add more value. You can always make it more perfect later down the line. But if you're holding yourself back simply because, quote, it's not perfect yet, like, you're never going to get it done and you're never going to achieve those goals.
And I also feel like it will never be done, because if you're a good educator, you're, like we said, a forever learner, and like, things change. Like, we were just talking about lashes being completely different when you first started versus what they are now. If you are, well, not even just waiting, but like, you are building this thing and it's perfect and you put it out there and you never touch it again, it's gonna die in like a couple years or a year. Like, it's not gonna have updated information. Not saying like the core of your education is gone and done, but like, it needs to be added on to, because we learn new things and like, new technology comes out, new information comes to the front, and we have to adapt and change. And I think that if you're educating in a way that's like dinosaur and not, you know, evolving and growing, you're doing a disservice to yourself and your students. So I think the idea of holding out for something is so silly, because it's never going to be done and it's always going to be updated. So why even, you know, wait for that perfectionism or whatever level that you're like putting yourself up to, that's keeping you back from doing it.
Oh yeah, I agree more.
Well, another thing is that I always love seeing all of your preparations and then hanging out like at the trade shows. I know all of us love a good trade show, and you speak at a lot of the trade shows, and that is like, it's super funny to say as a podcast host, but I hate public speaking, and I like, can only imagine this is so different. We're talking on social media, talking in this way is so different than being in front of a crowd, and I can only imagine, how do you gear up for that? Is it still nerve-wracking for you? How do you go about prepping for a speech?
It is still nerve-wracking. Like, I don't think there will ever be a day that I'm like, oh yeah, loosey-goosey, like, chill. Like, we're good, let's go. I literally am like, it's so funny too, because like, right before I'm supposed to go on, I like go to the bathroom, and I'm a crazy person, and like, I have to get my mindset right, and I will literally look in the mirror and be like, you are safe. Your internal organs are safe. Because one of my high school marketing teacher she knew that I had such a hard time with like doing presentation, and she taught me how to stand like in the small room that we were in and what to say to myself, because basically our primitive brain goes to that place of thinking that we're going to be attacked and killed. And that's why a lot of people, like when they stand up there, they cover themselves, or they like they hold their hands in front of their belly. And of course that's like what you're supposed to do. That's a good like power stance basically.
Yeah.
But people like start to curl in and they don't stand up straight because you're trying to protect your internal organs. You're trying to protect your most vulnerable spot. So I go to the mirror and I say, your internal organs are safe. You are safe. And then I'm like, I have to go through this whole mind, jump through all these hoops in my mind, reminding myself, these people want to hear what you have to say. You have value to share. And even if one person gets value from this and everyone else in the room knows all about this topic that I'm speaking about, maybe one person is going to take value from this.
Oh,
And
love
I get
that.
up there and it's funny because I'll look at videos, and up there the whole like first minute I feel like my voice is shaking and I feel like, oh my gosh, they know I'm nervous. They can tell. And then I watch the playback and I'm like, wait, I don't sound shaky. And my boyfriend came to one of my talks a year ago and he was like, Kenzie, you didn't sound shaky at all. And I was like, really? I was like, it was okay. And then I feel like once I get about a minute into it, I'm like, okay, I know my shit. I know what I'm talking about. And I know this is actually going to be really good. Like, I was asked here for a reason. It's because I've shared my voice on social media, talking about these things and helping countless people change their businesses and change their lives through pricing their services, through social media, through technique and things that I talk about and teach. And it's like, I don't think it'll ever be easy. And as far as like prepping goes, besides talking to myself in the mirror,
I love that though.
I create my slides and I literally look through them like a couple times a week just to make sure, like, okay, yes, I know what sequence I'm talking in, but I never rehearse a speech. I never have cue cards. I never have anything like that, because I've done that in the past, not in the conferences, but for like high school speeches or, this one college speech that I had to do. And if I stumbled on one thing, the whole rest of it was shot. And then I was trying to backtrack, trying to do things. So for me, I just have like kind of my talking points. I have my slides. I know what I'm talking about for those certain things. And then I'm able to just kind of wing it, not wing it, but like, I know what I'm talking about. I know what points I need to say, and then I'm good. And a couple of the talks, like, I've done one of the same talks and I've adjusted it a little bit with each conference, but I've done it 3 times. And by the third time, I'm like, okay, I could do this talk in my sleep. And it's funny because with that one, the first time I had 2 hours to talk about it. So I talked for an hour and a half and then had 30 minutes Q&A. The second time I talked about it, I had 45 minutes. So I was like, okay, I need to shorten this. And then the third time I had 15 minutes. So the amount of slides I deleted, that I was like, I need to give them just the like most impactful details.
Yeah.
So when you start doing that and you start speaking, you start to realize what works for you and what you need to do, instead of, my process is not going to be your process, is not going to be someone else's process.
Yeah.
And I think in anything, you have to figure out what works for you.
No, I love that because it's so true. But I also like the talking to yourself because I feel like that's so real. Like the few times that I have, I 100% am like, everything has evacuated my brain and I have no idea what I'm talking about. Like the first few trainings, I remember just being like, okay, what do we talk about? Brows, that's right. Like it's so hard and it's so scary, but you're right. I like the reminder too of they're there to hear what you want to say. Like nobody would be here if they didn't want to hear what you had to say. And even beyond that, at least one person walks away with something, like there's a benefit to it. And I think that at the end of the day, at least in our, well, maybe everywhere, but in our industry, like I feel like most of our education or educators' goals are to just help and share what we know. So if we're helping somebody, like, job well done, we've gotten what we need across. For anybody new to trade shows, what would be your recommendation for somebody going for their first time, or like any tips or tricks or anything?
Especially if you are in the lash world, like if you do brows and lashes, LashCon is my absolute favorite conference. It's in October in Anaheim, and I will be going to Disneyland this year, either before or after because it's right there.
Yeah.
And it's just so cool. It's the biggest lash industry event that I know of.
Okay.
And last year, I think they had 1,100 attendees. And the year before, I think it was like 700 or 800. And it's so cool, especially if you do lashes, because they have so many different speakers. And something I love about their conference as well is they have their plenary sessions where everyone goes in and you listen to the set speakers, and then they have the breakout sessions where 4 different educators are speaking at the same time, so you can't be everywhere at once. So you pick what room you want to go to, and for anyone that you missed, they have an app that after the conference you can go back and watch the replay of all the other things. So
that's so cool.
for the ticket price, I think the ticket price is $1,000 or $1,100 or something. There's breakfast included in the mornings, and you literally get so many educational talks that are not only just about lashes. It's about business, it's about pricing, it's about opening a salon, running a salon. Some people talk about, you know, integrating human design into your business and having employees and integrating that. So there is just so much to learn there. And that's another thing that I would follow up as far as like advice for anyone going to these conferences or going to trade shows. It's like, go there to learn. And even if you can pick up one thing from each speaker, like that's huge. And like not everyone is outgoing like I am, but like make friends, like get on the Facebook pages that are like, oh, you know, you can room share with people if you're worried about going by yourself, or if you have a friend. Like I brought my sister to one of the conferences, and they are just, I think it's just go ready to learn. And obviously there's parties, which are a lot of fun, but like don't get too drunk that you're sleeping through half the next day.
Oh my god, right. I couldn't imagine a trade show with a hangover. That sounds horrible.
I know. Exactly. And it's like, just put yourself out there and talk to people. And especially like at the trade shows with the booths, like don't be afraid to go up and ask questions and talk to people, introduce yourself, especially if you're someone who wants to do brand partnerships. If you want to do UGC content for brands, if you want to do a collaboration with them, if you want to be on their PR list, like if you meet them in person, they are way more likely to want to connect with you on social media, and they are going to be way more likely to be like, wait, this is one to watch. Like this is someone who has amazing work, and like I love their personality. Like you never know, like a couple people who have done this, they're a CEO of a company now, a lash company. Like other people are head educators of different things simply because they made connections at conferences and trade shows. So it's like, put yourself in those rooms, because you have no idea what that connection might do for you a month from now, 6 months from now, a year from now, that you might not even have thought was available. You might be asked to speak at the next one if they, if they really like you.
You really don't know the opportunities and the doors that it can open. So truly. So you said that there was a little bit of brow. I've heard of LashCon just like through following you and other lash artists and everything, but you said there was some brow. Is it like a area that brow booths are at as well, or is it really strictly lashes?
I think it's mainly lashes, but like Elibana goes, and like I don't know if Brow Code goes, but there are brands that have like brow lamination lines, and like I know a lot of the lash brands have now started to carry their own lash lift line and brow lamination lines. And so it's like, even if you were a strict brow artist, I still think there would be connections to be made with brands, with other influencers, with you know, and there's so much info that you can learn from. And I would just recommend, like, any conference or expo that you're interested in, like, go on their website, see who's speaking, and see the topics to be like, okay, yes, like I could benefit from this.
That's a good advice. Yeah, I like that.
Another one that has a lot of brows is actually Premier Orlando. I went to that one 2 summers ago, or maybe it was last summer. I went in 2023. And that one was so cool because there was like a lash section and a brow section, and there were a couple people that I didn't know in the brow world, and I looked them up. I'm like, damn, this guy's got 300,000 followers. I was like, he's a big deal, and he was teaching the art of brows, and it was people were lined up to see him. So like Premier Orlando, that one was really cool. And that one is where they have the huge trade show floor with hair, skin, brows, nails, lashes, all the things. So I would definitely recommend that one if you are like specifically in the brow world.
That's really cool. No, that's good to know. That's awesome. One of the things like that you mentioned with that guy is that I've noticed more and more, like, even though I feel like the longer I've been in the beauty world, I'm like, it's so niche down. Like, there's only so many people. And then, like, I'll stumble across a page that has, like, 50,000 followers, 300,000 followers. And I'm like, how have I never heard of you or come across you? Like, clearly you have a following. And it just, I don't know, at one point, I'm just like, am I behind the times? And then the other side of it is, like, it's such a kind of boost of inspiration of just, like, you don't have to know everyone to get, like, a leg up or, you know, be your own icon in your own world and everything like that. And there's always more people to learn from, too. It's really cool. I love
Absolutely.
that. Okay. Do you have, I always have to ask, do you have any new courses or like classes or anything like that coming up?
I do have something in the works. I actually haven't even, I've literally just like mind mapped what I want to do with it, and I have an idea. And it's actually one thing I love / hate about myself is like once I have an idea, like it'll be done within a day because I don't let the perfection get in the way, and then I'll go and revise it and I'll do all this other stuff. So I have had so many questions from people about social media lately. And I have a social strategy course, but basically I think people need the continuing support and help and like reassurance that like, yes, you can do this. Like you're doing the right thing. Like I believe in you. And so I'm creating, firstly, it's going to be a free live webinar for everyone to come in and ask questions, to meet them, just kind of get a feel for me, especially if they've never learned from me before or heard any of my advice on social media. And especially it's going to be more tailored to the people who want to show up the way I show up, who want to put their face forward. And it's going to be, I can't decide if it's going to be like a 1-month program where we're doing weekly calls and they're getting feedback, they're getting trending audio each week, they're getting all these different things and help with transitions, because that's the same thing with me. I have to remember, like, a lot of these people don't know how to edit a reel the way I edit a reel, or what's going to make something be more captivating than, you know, sitting there and people being like, wait a minute, this is not captivating my attention. So I kind of am just breaking it down to the basics. So I'm thinking it'll be a month-long program. Or maybe it'll be something where it's a subscription where people can continue to come, and then it would be like 1 call per month or something. So I'm working on that. So I would say probably in the next couple months. I actually might wait and then launch it on my birthday, which is the end of September. But we'll see, because I have this like, I want to move fast, and then I'm like, wait, we should do this very intentionally and like make sure. Yeah, right. Yeah.
You get so excited about it. But I want to circle back. What is mind mapping? I love that.
So mind mapping is, I actually learned this from Tress Larson. She is the head educator at PLA now. She used to work for Blackbox LA. And it's something that I think people have used in the like coaching mindset industry for a long time, and I'm now just stumbling upon it. But you can take a big piece of paper, and let's say you want to create an online course to make it an easy example for me to explain. Let's say I want to create my first in-person lash extension course. So I'll write lash extension course, I'll circle it in the middle of the page, and I'll draw a line off of it, and I'll say, okay, I need to talk about retention. Then I'll circle that, and then I'll create another bubble, and I'll say, I need to talk about placement. And then I'll create another bubble off of that middle bubble, and I'll say, I need to talk about like how to make a fan. And then from there, you off of those other bubbles, so off of that retention bubble, I would have a line that says ingredients. I would have a line off of that little bubble that says, you know, irritation versus allergy when it comes to adhesive. And then another dot that says how much adhesive to use, and so on and so forth. So then it's like, so because people sit down and they think, I need to create this outline, and they're like, where do I start? And so
it's a common problem I have.
And so it just breaks it down to be like, wait a minute, this was so easy. And then you have your outline from there.
I love that. That's brilliant. Honestly, like, I'm working on courses and I'm like, I need to backpedal. That makes so much more sense, because it's really overwhelming trying to think, because you have like, you have like the course idea, but then you have just this jumble of stuff that you're like, okay, I have to cover all of this. How do I get it out? And you looking at a blank page, you're like, either I word vomit this all out and I have no idea where to go from here, or I try to come up with an outline, and then you're like, you always end up almost like backpedaling of just like, oh wait, no, this should go first, and trying to find an order too early is really difficult. So I like that kind of removes the 1-2 type thing and kind of just puts it all out there.
Absolutely, because that's what, halted me for a long time is like, well, what do I teach first? Like, it doesn't matter as long as you're
Yeah.
getting the information out there. Like, yes, most of the time you'll find a sequence that seems the
Yeah.
most like, correct way to do things, but that just again takes that kind of uh it just takes that like roadblock out of the way. And then you just
Yes.
get all the information that you need. And then from there, because that stuff takes me 5 minutes. And then in 5 minutes, I have an outline for a whole online course
Well, and
or
I think like
in-person course.
yeah, and I think like you said, the seeing the sequence is really hard, but it almost is easier when it's all out. You can see what you would have to do first in order to get to like the end goal or whatever it is. Like once you see it all laid out, you're like, well, obviously I'm not gonna, I don't know, do this before step whatever. Like that can't go here. But it's really difficult to do it until you have it all laid out. So I love that.
Yeah, it's an incredible tool.
Yeah, I'm definitely gonna steal it. Okay, so before we popped on the call today, I emailed you some questions and I wanted to go over them with you. So, first question is what is your 2024 word for your business and why? And then has it changed in the last since we're 6 months, over 6 months into the year?
My 2024 word was actually intentional, which was my
Okay.
word a couple years ago, but I felt like I needed to go back to it. And for me, because I feel like we can have all these goals, but if we're not setting intentions, if we're not like, okay, this is actually how I'm going to get there and being intentional with our time, then it's going to be a lot harder to have that roadmap. It's going
Yeah.
to feel like a windy road of like, wait, where am I going? It's like having, you know, somewhere that you need to be that you've never been before and you're not using your maps. You're just
Yeah.
like, figure out how to get there. And so for me, I feel like being intentional with my time, intentional with who I surround myself with, intentional what shows I'm watching, intentional with what books I'm reading, intentional with, you know, being mindful of what do I actually want instead of thinking this is what everyone is telling me my next goal should be, so I'm just going to go for it instead of realizing like what actually do I want. And so I feel like that's stayed the same for me
Oh, I love
this year.
that. That's really
Mhm.
important though, because I think that we talk a lot about like comparison online, but I think one of the other things that we kind of skim over is feeling like not necessarily somebody telling you that this is what you should be doing, but I feel like we get this kind of, well, that's what she did to become successful, so I need to do that next. And it's like, okay, but do you even want to? Like we were talking about employment earlier, like that path is not for everybody. Salon ownership, not for everybody. There's so many talented people that are doing so many different other things, and I think that we do get a little bit tripped up. So I really like that. I think knowing what you want your intention to be is really important. Okay, and then best piece of advice you would give your younger self or young Esty if you were to go back.
I would say kind of what we were talking about at the beginning of this episode is just can be a forever learner. Like understand that you don't know everything, and then when you feel like you do, you really
Humble
don't.
Esty when you're young.
Yes. Yeah. And I feel like to follow up my previous answer too is like just be true to who you are and try to check in with yourself to realize what you actually do want. Because I think for so many of us that pathway is laid out to this is what you do first and then you do this and then you do that. And a lot of people that I know that opened salons and had employees have closed them down within the last couple of years because they're like, I didn't realize that this is actually not what I wanted. And if that's what
Yeah.
you want and you really truly do want a team and you truly do want a successful salon, like there are so many people out there to help you do that. I am not one of them. I haven't loved it. And there are other people out there that are better equipped to give you good information on that. But I would just say like really truly be in touch and in tune with what you want moving forward and continue to invest in those education classes and the business classes. I would definitely say take business classes sooner than you think you need them.
Oh, it's so real. I think that when you were first starting out, especially like even on your own or not, you're just like, I'll figure it out. Like I'm not to a stage where any of that's important. It's like it's so much easier when it feels like there's nothing heavy on your shoulders. When you get your business gets more successful and things start really moving, it's very stressful trying to figure those things out, like backpedaling. So I completely agree with that. And then what are your 3 favorite products right now? Self-care product that you're using in your studio, whatever.
Honestly, I bought these not little, they're actually big fans from TikTok shop. My salon, like, are fans that we use to like dry clients' lashes off at the end of the day. They like, we've had them since we first opened. So like 3.5 years, and they were all just kind of like, they're not charging right, something. So I bought these fans. I thought they were going to be tiny, and they're these like massive fans, but they're actually so cool. And they have 5 settings. And then, so that would be my number one. Number two, my Kindle. So I got a Kindle a few months ago, and I have so many physical books. Like, I love a physical book in my hands, but for traveling and like when I'm going to the conferences and I want to read on the plane, it's so nice to be able to pick whatever book I want rather than being like, oh, well, I only brought this one book. So I love that.
I'm a sucker for the Kindle too.
I know, it's so good. I have my Kindle Unlimited. I'm like, charge me that $11 a month because I'm getting more. And I would say product number 3, another thing from TikTok shop, for those of you, I don't know if you view the video on Spotify, but I got this monitor that is MagSafe, so you can film with your back camera and it sits there and it screen shares, so it'll show you. Cool. And my video quality has been so much better for my talking head videos and stuff. So I'm like obsessed with that one. Yes, I will definitely send you the link.
That's awesome. That is really cool, because that's the trickiest part is, I mean, wanting to use your like selfie camera because it's just easier, obviously. And I think it's really hard to like focus on, I don't know, there's something about looking at yourself versus looking at like a little camera. Like, I can't focus when I'm looking at a little camera. I can focus when I'm looking at myself and like what I'm trying to say.
Or I realize I'm like off center. And I'm like, oh my gosh, now I don't want to edit this and like be so zoomed in that now the quality is grainy. So that thing has been a lifesaver.
That's incredible. I love that. That is super handy. Okay, and then last one, what is an ingredient that you're loving right now? I know we could have talked about this before we popped on, but I'm excited.
Okay, so I actually thought of something, and this is probably going to be, people are going to be like, what are you talking about? Magnesium. I have been drinking like magnesium tea at night, and then I also have a magnesium lotion that I rub on my hands and feet before going to bed. I have never had the best sleep in my life than I do. I think I've gone through 4 bottles of the magnesium lotion because I've been using it for like a year. I feel like I sleep so much better, and I know magnesium is also something that helps with anxiety, which I've had a whole journey with. Could be a whole other podcast episode. Right?
No, seriously.
And so I feel like that has been huge.
That's awesome. I'm gonna have to try the lotion. I love like the sleepy girl drink or whatever, like the mocktail that you can make with, like the magnesium and cherry juice or whatever. But I've never tried the lotion. I'm gonna have to try that.
My gosh, literally best sleep ever.
Right? Well, this was a blast. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I mean, we just talked an hour away so quickly. I love it. I love when the conversation just flows. So make sure to check out Mackenzie's podcast also, Talkin' Smack. I'll link it in the show notes. And then thanks for being here. Hope you got some good information from us on this episode. And I will catch you next week.
Thank you.